Welcome to Marin Voices and Views. With Lawrence A. Strick, I'm Peter B. Collins. In our second segment today, we'll meet Susan Gilmore from the North Bay Children's Center to talk about the impact of state budget cuts on child care services in Marin. Larry, please introduce our first guest.
Sure, Peter. We have Judy Arnold. Supervisor Arnold represents Novato and North Marin on the Board of Supervisors, where she's been elected to her second term. She has a lot of experience in government at both the local and state level. She was on the staff of Gary Giacomini. She worked with John Burton, Carol Migden, and has also been a member of the Novato City Council. She's a mom of 3, a grandmother of 5, and has been in the county for quite some time. Judy, Marin has 5 districts. You have Novato. Tell us what's special about Novato, what's going on up there with the assets they have and the challenges they have right now.
I'd be glad to. Novato has changed a lot, probably more than any other district in the county. We are soon probably going to have the biggest population. We are land-wise, much bigger than San Rafael. The only bigger land district is the 4th district, which covers, of course, all of West Marin. But because of the housing meltdown, many families are moving to Novato because of the affordability of the houses and because of the good schools. So we've had an influx of new young families that have said, we want, for example, when I was running for city council, the young mom said, we want healthy food choices in Novato. They organized a website, they took a Dream Grocer survey, they sent out letters, and I worked with them, and we were able to bring in about 6 months, Whole Foods and Trader Joe's to Novato. So we have downtown a huge project where we have a huge Whole Foods and 130 condos on top, right next to the railroad track, so it's transit-oriented development at its best. So Novato has really, I think, come into its own. The council spent $3 million upgrading the downtown. So we have this very quaint down in Old Town on Grant Avenue, lots of new stores, lots of restaurants, and I am working very hard with the citizens group to buy the downtown Grant Avenue Theater and remodel it into movies, music performances, digital arts, exactly like the Lark Theater, and Bernice Beza, who remodeled and single-handedly almost did the Lark Theater, is in charge of doing this.
Oh,
so we're raising money for the Novato Theater.
That's exciting.
It is very exciting.
Now, Judy, there's kind of a split in the community, particularly over the issue of affordable housing. You mentioned the units above Whole Foods there, right downtown. But there seems to be a struggle from the existing population that fears that state mandates will force affordable housing in certain neighborhoods. Tell us what that dispute is about and how you see it being resolved.
What I think the way it started was the city manager and the city staff said it's time to update our housing element, and we'll look at potential sites where housing can go in. That doesn't mean housing is going to go in, but they just have to say to the state, here's where we could put housing if, for example, this lot sold, if this shopping center went under, whatever. But the neighbors heard about it, and I think partly because these are tough economic times, they got very afraid that we were going to have or that Novato was going to have 5-story projects and their property values were going to go down, which had already slipped down anyway, and it just became very contentious. And I, of course, have nothing to say about the housing element because I will do the county housing element, but this is all done in the city of Novato. But I was so concerned about it and felt so badly watching the rhetoric and just the polarization that was happening in the town that I went to Jared Huffman, our assemblyman, and asked him if he would please introduce a bill that would allow Novato and the county to be listed as suburban instead of urban in the ABAG numbers, which would mean that we would only have to do 20 homes per acre instead of 30. He agreed to do it, and that bill is due out today. And he also is going to ask the state to allow more conversions. We have so many homes that are in foreclosure. Why not be able to deed restrict them and count them so that they're scattered throughout the county instead of building larger multifamily units? So he is doing that, and we have met with the affordable housing representatives, the advocates. They have agreed to support his bill. We have also met with the groups that are so concerned about high density housing, and they're waiting to see the bill. Hopefully, I am hoping, and so is Jared, that we'll be able to bring both sides together to support this bill and kind of bring some kind of peace to Novato.
You've talked about enhancing the downtown area with the Whole Foods, the Trader Joe's, and other businesses. Excuse me. How do you make it incentives for people to shop downtown Novato as opposed to Vintage Jokes and going out over the freeway to those big box stores over there?
Well, because we have very unique stores downtown, and when I was on the city council, we also offered some incentives for people to come in town, for maybe to allow less parking, give them some kind of credit and for coming in. And I think we had a lot of stores move in when they heard that Whole Foods was coming downtown. So we have very unique stores. Pal's Candy, we have which is an old-time candy store. Mm-hmm. We have 3 really fine women's clothing stores. We have now 4 or 5 restaurants in Old Town. So, and I think when we get the theater open, that's going to make all the difference in the world. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, one of the areas that you've focused on, you're one of the 2 Marin members of the board for the SMART train. Yes. That is being developed. And it's an interesting assignment for you because I understand that you originally weren't in support of SMART, but your job now is to implement the will of the voters. And it's not easy. There's a shortfall of money. And David Heath, the interim manager, was here on our program last month. And we're both pretty sympathetic to the project and want to see it work.
Yes.
But we didn't come away from a conversation with David Heath with a lot of confidence. Uh-huh. There isn't a clear plan to go all the way from Santa Rosa to Larkspur. And the idea of putting portions of it online is not very attractive and doesn't seem to reflect what the voters of Marin were expecting. We at least want to see Novato to Larkspur. So how do we work through this? And should we be considering a plan to scrap it as simply a great idea that can't work in the current economic environment?
Well, let me say, first of all, I did not oppose SMART. I did not work against it, but I was concerned because SMART had not dealt with the freight, the North Coast Railroad Authority that will be going through Novato. And I said at the time, you need to negotiate with NCRA and tell us how you're going to work out, both of you, using the track. And they didn't do that, and so I just stayed out of the race. But 62% of my district voted for the train.
And just one other point, those tracks need a lot of work, don't they?
Well, yeah. Well, they've been upgraded by NCRA, but SMART will have to do more. Yes, absolutely. Here's the reality. The SMART. I went on the SMART board, and I said my district voted. The only district that voted more for SMART was Fairfax. So I'm going to get in there and work hard to make it viable and good. When no one foresaw this economic downturn, SMART never even thought they'd have to go out for federal funding. They thought they'll go for bonding. With the sales tax, we're golden. And let me just say this. In the beginning, I think SMART had been so beat up during 2 elections that they almost had a bunker mentality. And then a lot of new people like myself got on the board, and I said, you have to be transparent to the public. Why aren't we webcasting these meetings? And they said, well, we can't afford it. Well, I thought they couldn't afford not to, because the public were not brought along. Here's the difference. Now I think everyone's gotten the message. We have a new board, we have a new president, a lot of new members on the board, and we're really trying hard to explain to the public we have a $104 million deficit for this initial operating segment. I said initially they were going to go from Railroad Square just to the Marin County Civic Center, and I said, are you kidding? You can't do that. That's only 8 miles of train for Marin County. So they finally said, well, we're going to go to the Downtown Transit Center.
But we have the Cow Park Tunnel, the last leg is built.
You know, here's the deal. We have a $104 million deficit. We have made up 88 million of it in cuts. And those cuts are, it can only run from Railroad Square to downtown San Rafael Transit Center. And we're going to have to make other cuts. Only two-thirds of the bike path is going to be built. They're talking about not having the train stop at Atherton in northern Novato, where 300 employees at Fireman's Fund work. This does not look good, but the only way to stop SMART would be to repeal the Measure Q, and I don't see that happening. So we've just got to get in there and make it work. And you know, I think if we bring the public in and say, stay with us, ride the train, we'll give you shuttles to the ferry from where the train stops in San Rafael, and while we work through this and go for federal funding, we'll then go from Cloverdale to Larkspur. And if we don't,
In 20...
we don't. Listen, it's a toughie. It's a
2058?
toughie. I understand. I wanted to bring in SkyTran, which was multimodal in pods, and they all laughed at me, and that probably would have worked.
Let's talk about something that seems to be successful, and that's Marin Energy Authority.
Yes.
There was a time when people were very, very concerned about it, calling it risky. I think you yourself called it risky, and were one of the supervisors who voted against the county loans, which my understanding has been repaid.
They've all been repaid, and let me just say, I did not say it was risky. I voted all along to loan money, except the very last time. And I said, you know, with the economy like it is, I told Charles I'm not going to vote for it for this last loan. And so on a 3-2 vote, he got his last loan, and I do think it's been very successful. And the county has been, the taxpayer dollars have all been repaid. And I just think this is, in light of the mistakes and what PG&E's been doing, I think MEA has been totally vindicated for all the negativity they've had.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that campaign against them by PG&E was just horrific.
Brutal.
Well, it's more than brutal. It really seemed to be a systematic disinformation campaign.
It was. And then the proposition to try to stop
16.
it was because of Marin, Prop
Yeah.
16.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Judy, the board just approved more than $2 million in additional budget cuts. What's your forecast for this year through June 30th? And what are the prospects for further cuts because of state funding cutbacks in the fiscal year that starts July 1?
We have 1.3 million more to cut, which I think we already see where that's going to come from. We are going to change the OB and GYN clinics that the county was operating when we didn't have any before, and have those people served at the community clinics, because then they get higher Medi-Cal rates. So that will be, I think, the final cut. What the state is going to do is the huge question, and we don't know, and we might have to take more drastic cuts when we see what they do. And I don't know if this ballot to increase, or not to increase, but to extend the taxes for 5 years, I don't know if that's going to get on the ballot, and if it doesn't, I think it's going to be draconian. It's going to be terrible.
You're working on the Marin Economic Forum. Tell us a little bit about that, and what your plans are, and how much success you're anticipating with that.
I'm very excited about that. When I was elected, I said I want to get a Marin Economic Forum started to deal with the county's third E. The overall goal is sustainability. Under that is environment, social equity, and economy. The county has done a lot in environment. We have the safety net for our social equity, but we just haven't done much with economy. And I've said when I've gone out to the public, I think it's because Marin just thinks that they're above talking about money. But in this downturn, the County of Marin did a survey, and usually the survey, you ask them an open-ended question: what are your two biggest concerns? And it has always been lack of affordable housing and traffic congestion. This last year, the two biggest concerns were jobs and economy and traffic congestion. So we formed the Marin Economic Forum, and it is composed of 30 board members, the majority of which are from businesses. The rest is education, nonprofits, and Charles McGlashan and I representing government. The county said we will match, they said this last year, $150,000 if the businesses raise $150,000 to get this started. In 4 months, the businesses raised $150,000. So we're now interviewing for a CEO. We have an economic sustainability specialist, Rob Eiler. We're working at helping the businesses that are here, that our targeted industry show will do well in Marin. We're having a tech conference for all of the people that work home alone, like Twitter and Tweet and all of this, and they're going to all get together because they want to meet each other and exchange ideas. We have been asked to do economic analysis similar to EIRs on projects that are coming through, so that we can see, here are the environmental mitigations, here are the outcomes, but also here's what the economy will show. So I think this is going to be great for Marin County.
Judy, our time is tight, but I also want to thank you for serving on the Marin Telecommunications Agency that oversees the community media center here that we're so thrilled with.
Me too.
Doing a lot of great work, and I know that you're working to extend the resources so it'll be sustainable in the long term.
I am.
Judy Arnold, Supervisor, District 5, thanks for being our guest today.
You're welcome. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thanks for coming
You're
by.
welcome.
Joining us now on Marin Voices and Views is Susan Gilmore. She's the founder and executive director of the North Bay Children's Center, which serves 400 families at 6 centers in Marin and Sonoma counties. Here in Marin, your main center is at Hamilton Field. You have a second location in Novato on Tinker Way. And NBCC has 2 locations in Petaluma, 2 in Santa Rosa. Susan, welcome. Tell us about your mission and the profile of the families that you serve.
Sure. Well, the North Bay Children's Center is a nonprofit child development program that provides early care and high-quality educational programs to children from 6 weeks through 12 years old. So we have infants, toddlers, preschoolers, and then before and after school care for school-age children. And approximately 65% of those families receive tuition assistance so that parents can remain in the workforce and have quality child care to help them balance work and family and everything else one must balance here in the county and Sonoma County. We have our programs really focus on school readiness and being able to promote healthy living and healthy choices for children and families. And part of what we also do, in addition to our academic programs and care and scholarships, is that we have our award-winning Garden of Eden program that we've had in place for over 6 years now, that serves all 6 sites, that teaches children and their families about healthy eating and making choices that will stay with them for life. And that's a really important program for us, because as we begin to look at statistics about children, and I don't know if you're familiar, I mean, we've all read that children born after 2001, about 1 in 3 will be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And that was a statistic that I read 6 years ago that was quite alarming.
Yeah.
And I looked at the families that we serve and the fact that North Bay Children's Center provides 2 meals a day and snacks to all these children. I realized that, wow, we are contributing to this epidemic, because we have a food program that is subsidized by the state, and it meets the state's guidelines for health and nutrition, which are hardly healthy or nutritious, and set out to look at how we were going to overhaul our food program. And what we ended up doing was we received a grant from First 5 Marin for $150,000 to be able to start this pilot project. So we overhauled our food program. We created a garden on site, and we have a garden coordinator and a nutritionist to work with our children and our families and our staff.
Did you bring some samples?
Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Everyone knows that childcare is absolutely essential for working families, and safe environments for kids are essential to have people feel comfortable going to work and leaving their kids with quality caregivers. But it also benefits employers. Have you found that with your group?
Absolutely, and it's really important to draw that link for our employers. With most nonprofits, most childcare programs that are, especially those with state subsidies, have to raise dollars outside of parent fees and outside of the state reimbursements to be able to provide the care for these families. The cost to provide the care is much higher than parent fees and the subsidies. And for North Bay Children's Center, that's about a $300,000 a year gap. And we rely on the business community to help fill that gap. And I think that it's really important that we make the case to the business community that not only are we helping their current workforce, but we're shaping their future workforce with the programs that we provide for these children.
Well, good. You just made your case, so maybe we can get some guys to kick some money over your side.
Absolutely, and it is a concept that is currently embraced by the Bay Area Council and the North Bay Leadership Council. In fact, there was a whole report that the Bay Area Council did recently encouraging the business community to be advocates for quality childcare and understand the importance and the links between high quality care and employee productivity, retention, and again, a skilled workforce in years to come.
Susan, I make a distinction between daycare and childcare, and when I hear daycare, I think of kind of group babysitting. But when I think of childcare, I think learning activities, social development. Can you explain your sense of the difference and what educational and social development opportunities you provide for the children at your centers?
Well, first of all, what's most important are the people that are with these children, and that you have an educated child care workforce. And programs that are subsidized by the state have to follow state guidelines that are much stricter than basic licensing guidelines, and all family daycare homes and child care centers have to meet licensing regulations. But the California Department of Education has standards that require teachers to have permits, that have assessments that are done on a regular basis for every child. There are benchmarks for children. When we talk about school readiness and closing the achievement gap, we're talking about programs that work, for example, North Bay Children's Center working very closely with the elementary schools that when our children graduate from North Bay Children's Center, we look at where they're going into elementary school and working very closely with those kindergarten teachers, with those schools on curriculum alignment. We're teaching with intention. There, we understand what children need to, what skills they need to have before they leave our program. And what's important too, when you have qualified teachers and you have that a curriculum that we're talking about, we're also, it's important that we are looking at early detection. We are able to take observed children that may have special needs and be able to out-refer them and get services for those families long before they go to school.
It's funny you mentioned the achievement gap. A couple of months ago, we had Tom Peters here from Marin Community Foundation, and he was talking about his attempts to work with local groups to close this achievement gap. I assume you're working with that group.
We are part of that partnership, and it's very exciting. I mean, for years we've all said that yes, we work in partnership with the schools. We all know who each other is. Often many of us have school sites. Our school programs are on school sites. We share real estate. We share resources, funding resources, but we've never had the luxury, the funding, the time, the ability for our teachers to work with the elementary school teachers on a regular basis about what it is that our programs are doing and how we're preparing these children to be able to be successful in these programs.
And so the achievement gap is getting kids who may not have a strong home center, home learning ability for whatever reason, so that they fall behind earlier in schools, and you're trying to prop them up when they get to school and they could achieve.
Correct.
As well as possible.
What's happening is there's many children many children have access to programs, preschool programs, prior to starting kindergarten. There are many, many children that don't. There are many children that have barriers besides the ability to afford a preschool program. We look at our changing demographics. We look at our English language learners. We look at children starting kindergarten, having been socialized before, not speaking English, families not understanding their role as a partner to the school system. And when a family is involved in an early childhood education program, all those things are addressed, and those children quickly learn, again, how to, it's important that they understand how to play nice in the sandbox together, that they are with children that they're going to be going to kindergarten with, that we have programs like Raising a Reader. And this is where it promotes literacy in the home, where every child in the school has a little red book bag. And every child once a week brings home books that parents are encouraged to read with the children. And the books are in English, the books are in Spanish. And the books sometimes are pictures, because some parents may not read, but it encourages them to sit down and look at pictures and tell stories with their children. And again, that is promoting that early literacy and getting parents involved in their children's education.
Susan, you're facing some real challenging issues with budgets. The state budget cuts passed in March whacked $1 billion from First Five, almost $600 million from the regional centers for the developmentally disabled, and some significant further cuts in state reimbursements and other payments. What's your forecast look like at the North Bay Children's Center, and where will you go to make up the difference from these cuts that will affect you?
Well, right now there's a lot of lobbying going on. It's scary. And you're right, there have been some significant cuts, and it's impacted programs and program quality and having resources that are no longer there. CalWorks, First Five you mentioned, we're now looking at a proposal that of a 25% cut, a 15% reduction in scholarship subsidies across the board, which means we would be serving less children. And then a 10% reduction in the standard reimbursement rate, which could devastate programs. And this is really important to follow, and really important that we make sure everybody understands the impact that's going to have on these programs. The standard reimbursement rate already does not cover the cost of care, and it is the same throughout California for every child care program. So Marin County is I mean, I don't have to tell you the costs associated with operating a business in Marin, and yet the reimbursement rate we have to operate that business already doesn't cover those costs, and it's gonna mean staff layoffs. It's gonna mean looking at the most expensive care, which is infant and toddler care.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's the most difficult care for parents to find, the hardest to afford, and looking at that. And there's going to be programs that are going to be cutting back those expensive programs and laying off staff, and parents not having care they could rely on for them to stay in the workforce.
Well, you provide vital services, and we wish you the best in these challenging times. Susan Gilmore from the North Bay Children's Center, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.